when I was young, there wasn't anything. It was just flat land here. And then later on, sports grounds were built. There were hockey fields, basketball courts. There might have even been a small rugby field. I can't quite remember that. And when I was at high school, I played basketball on those flats and hockey later on. The hockey and basketball fields were just across here, and there was a slope up to the hospital where we used to go afterwards and have a milkshake or some cool drink at the canteen in the hospital. On a Saturday afternoon, it was very busy. Most of the courts were being used, and people used to come and watch us playing as well. And we had all the teachers there barracking for each school or whatever organisation you were representing.
There were about 4 hockey grounds, rugby ground, and we used to use this as part of our establishment in the weekends and at nights. It was a fantastic part. We looked straight across the hockey ground to the Acton Hotel, which of course you can still do exactly the same looking across, but this was across a beautiful flat sporting ground, which at the weekends there was always people going back and forth. The road went down right past our house and down onto the flat, and you could see all the hockey girls and all the rugby people and coming down for their day, and you'd hear the noise.
I used to play a lot of hockey, and we used to play hockey down here on the flat below the bachelor's quarters. We used to play down there, so I used to ride up the hill from my place and over the hill and walk down the other side. So we used to play hockey there, and I played hockey at school.
St Christopher's and the other Catholic schools, we had sports day on the 17th of March always down there. We had hockey fields, basketball. It's a bit like T-ball because St Christopher's was boys and girls till leaving, and the sports, they seemed huge, you know. You'd think, oh, we'll get away from the nuns, we'll go over there to the whatever. And they seemed huge to me as a schoolgirl, and we always played basketball there, and they had competitions with different schools. They were always played down at the Acton basketball courts, and there was hockey down there. Just seemed a big area. It was dusty, but in the winter, you know, some of the grasses grew around a bit, and it was quite nice. I mean, it wasn't, you wouldn't say it was ugly, but, you know, it was nice to be there for sports and things.
I played hockey on the fields below the hospital, like before the hospital was built. It was real hollow, but we had great fun. That was an activity we could do without any trouble.
Played netball down in front where a new museum is. It was down on that flat, that side of the lake, and it was just like a quagmire. Like we'd get on the bus to go back to Queanbeyan, we'd be covered in mud, and we'd have to stand up all the way home. And your shoes would take nearly a week to dry. It was so wet, wasn't it? And the hockey was the same.
The hockey was the same.
And like they turned up week after week to get another drenching.
I played hockey, and in 1949 I started playing hockey at Acton. And I played that Acton there till 1952. Oh, we had a lot of fun. It was a very, very boggy oval, because it was low down, water level, river level, sea level, water level, below water level, I think. And so it was pretty boggy, and quite often we couldn't play, so we'd have concerts. The women would sing, some women would sing, some women would dance. We had concerts in a little shed there. Yeah, to wait for the bus to go home or to be picked up. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. We played against a lot of Canberra teams. Hospitals had nurses had a team, yeah, and Canberra High School had a team, and Waratahs. That was good fun.
They had playing fields, they're hockey playing fields, nothing like the fields that they've got now because they weren't mown. No grass, it was just weeds and they big clumps of them and you hit in between them. And we used to play hockey down there and that was good fun. It had to be pretty good to get past some of those clumps.
Before they developed the sporting fields, it was just one great big paddock. And it just meant for horses and cattle and floodlands, of course. Masses and masses of mustard weed would always pop up out of the ground when the floods were over, that yellow top mustard weed. Then, of course, they developed it into a sporting field known as University Oval. We used to call it University Oval. And it had rugby fields, hockey and basketball for the ladies. All the young women would gather there and all the young fellas would go down and look them over. Whatever. But that was the Acton playing fields. Canberra Royals, that was a rugby union side here that I got involved with. They used to train down in the Acton Flats. And eventually we obtained a cubicle from Fairburn when they pulled down a migrant camp in Fairburn. Way back in Fairburn out there, the field, there was a Maltese migrant camp there, workmen. And when it was dismantled, we got a hold of a cottage, not a cottage, a cubicle it was, a cubicle about 12 by 12 or 15 by 12 or something. Had it transported and plonked on the Acton field, and that was the first Royals clubhouse. From there they ventured into a bigger clubhouse that finally they went bust and all those sort of tragic things that happened to football sides. But we used to call it the boathouse because it endured 2 floods, one of which we had the photo of, which you got there, and that's how I got the name, the boathouse, the Royals Boathouse.
The Acton Flats used to have football grounds, used to have hockey grounds, and I think maybe basketball. I'm not quite sure on basketball, but there were half a dozen sheds there. They used to put supplies, storage.
There were about 3 concrete cricket wickets there, and so they were used. Of course, in the cricket season, I played many a game there, and in the winter they reverted to hockey fields, and I think it was mainly women's hockey, if I remember rightly.
The Acton Flats were the scene of many games of cricket, tennis and rugby, right up until around the 1960, when the planning for the lake and political decision making was in the pipeline. I remember the cricket oval, which, as I say, was more of a southerly site, and access, as I recall, access was always from the north. You meandered down that slope, that earthworks I referred to, which is I've seen it attributed to Griffin. But then, where rugby was concerned, there were 2 or 3 ovals. It wasn't big enough for an Australian rules game, I don't believe. But the rugby pitch, I recall, were rather close to the river. And if there'd been a storm, but you were still playing, or a storm the day before, or the day before that, and floodwaters were coming down the Molonglo, you could see them spreading across the flats. And I can recall one game when we had to fetch a ball out of the water to resume the game. I think we completed the game, but the waters were spreading across the flats as we were still playing. When my mother was in the hospice in 1998, 99, I visited her in the hospice. One day when I just hopped over the balcony and walked down a little bit towards the limestone formation, I found a cricket ball wedged in a tree, a very old cricket ball. And I could envisage, I said to myself, I know who hit that ball up in that tree. A guy who was a marvellous cricketer, and when I played under 14 cricket down on the Acton flats, adjacent to the tennis courts, there was a guy who could hit the ball so frequently over the boundary that his teammates used to stand around the boundary so he could throw the ball back quickly to the pitch so that he could score more runs. We did the work of the opposition just to speed the game up.
So my sister was in Mrs. Llewellyn's gymkhanas. I don't know whether there were more than one, but she does certainly remembers one down here where all I hear about is hockey and things like that. No, gymkhana down on the flats. It was a long way down. I mean, it was down there, way down. Hard to imagine. She didn't say very much at all because she doesn't have a memory like I have, sadly, but she could remember that the horse she rode was called Bimbo. And I can remember I was allowed to ride in the gymkhana, but for smaller children who didn't ride regularly, there was one particular event which was a walking event. And I got a ribbon for that, and I'd had it for years. You know, it was white felt with gold printing on it. And the horse I was on was called Flash, and when I told my sister about it, and it seemed like a very big horse, when I was telling my sister yesterday about it, she said, Flash was enormous. She's 3 years older than me, and she was much taller than I was. She was always taller. I don't know why I was on this great big horse. It's no wonder I have a head for heights now. Probably started then. But he was beautiful. He had the flash on his nose. Oh, it's wonderful. So I don't know how many gymkhanas were here. Maybe there was just the one.
There were occasional small gymkhanas that were held down on the Acton flats next to the hockey field, right next to the hockey field. In fact, the more I think about it, actually the actual gymkhanas actually might have even been held on a sports pitch, because I seem to remember cantering around in a circle or something. I seem to remember seeing some goalposts, have this in my memory, there's this goalpost at each end, so maybe we were actually on the actual hockey field itself. It was just a fun, friendly day with competitions for horses, dressage, riding your pony around in a ring, whose pony was the neatest dressed or had the best mane, or and plus games like flag racing, or tilting the ring was another one where you had to gallop along your horse and shove a sword through these rings that were hanging up. Flag racing was racing up and down on your horse and throwing flags as you picked them up and threw them into a barrel at the other end. So the people who were beginners could enjoy it, but it was also quite competitive and serious for the really good riders who had really good horses. And there's actually still a part of the paddock that still exists. You can still, it's still there. It's not all the paddock was put underwater, because there was a postage stamp of land that came up where Parks Way now goes under Liversidge Street. Parks Way goes under Liversidge Street, and the cycle path goes up a hill. Well, that hill there used to be where part of the paddock, and that was where the horses used to come up and people would feed them. So every afternoon at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, that's where you could park your car easily and get out with your buckets of hay and God knows what, and all the horses will have collected, because they knew that it was going to be feed time, and all the horses from the paddock would come up and you'd feed them there, because you could just you climb over the fence, park your car right there and have all your equipment and stuff and feed the horses. You didn't have to go chasing around after them in the paddock. So they'd all be there waiting in the afternoon. So every time I ride my bike up that little path, up there, up the hill to go over the top of Liz, I still think, I say to my husband, he says, now you're going to tell me that this used to be part of the Acton paddock. I say, yes, this used to be part of the Acton paddock, and this is where I used to feed my horse. So I say it every time we go. Drive him mad. Anyway.